Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Marshall. I'm the co-chair of our Safe Together, Strong Together campus COVID planning team. My compatriot, Dr. Amy Bronson, is out traveling today, and so we've got some special guests that we're glad to welcome here in the studio. To start off with, I want to remind everybody that today is, in addition to being an update, we're hoping to take some questions and answers. So as you have questions that arise, please post those in the chat. We'll try and get to as many as we possibly can today. To start with, a couple of updates. Last week, we heard from Mesa County Public Health that there was a rise in the community, not on campus, but in the community among young people testing positive for COVID-19. Our expectation is that some of those increases in cases out in the community could very well make their way on to campus. Dr. Bronson and I had sent a message, in fact, a couple of nights ago, specifically addressing this and asking our students and our campus to redouble our efforts to continue to be safe and following all of our protocols, staying with our Mavely, ensuring that we're doing the hand washing, the masking, and so forth. A word about that while we get started. Governor Polis has issued a mask mandate for all of Colorado. Colorado Mesa University has embraced that mask mandate, so masks are mandatory in classes and anywhere else indoors. There is a provision where we're allowed to make television appearances so that we can clearly communicate with you all, which is why you see my mask off during today's program. I'd like to give you a quick update on our testing. And really now, here we are 7 weeks into the semester, and we have been able to successfully navigate an early baseline testing, which all of you participated in. We were able to conduct something like 9,000 plus tests right out of the gate. We caught 37 positives prior to them arriving on campus and eliminating that additional source of spread. Once the semester started, we transitioned into our surveillance detection and what we might call reflexive testing, in addition to random testing. So this is one of the most comprehensive testing models, as it's turned out, anywhere in Colorado on university campuses. It really starts with this idea of wastewater testing, which I'll talk more about in a minute. Moves on to LAMP, or a rapid saliva screening. It's not a test, it's a quick rapid screen. And then ultimately the PCR tests, which are a diagnostic and highly accurate test. Why the multi-tiered approach? Well, really a pretty straightforward thing. The wastewater, as it turns out, has really served as an alarm bell for us. What we've done, as some of you may know, is we've installed these wastewater collection units in a variety of places where we've clustered residence halls here on campus. Those wastewater detections, we send those off twice a week, and we're able to then determine if there's any COVID-19 in the wastewater in that cluster of residence halls. I can report to you today that as of this point of the semester, we've had 2 different spikes in that wastewater where we had students who didn't realize that they were sick or infected, I should say, and we were able to find those early, basically move into that residence hall, do a lot of extra testing in that cluster of residence halls, and in both instances, we've been able to find, test, isolate the positives and get them into isolation rooms. And so the wastewater has really been a pleasant surprise, as we didn't totally know what we were getting into, but as it's turned out, that's been a vital resource to us. The next level as part of our strategy has been the LAMP testing, which is a rapid saliva screening. Now I call it a screening because it's not a diagnostic test, it's really just a screening. So it is less sensitive than a diagnostic PCR test, but what it makes up for what it loses in sensitivity, I should say, it makes up for in speed. So rather than sending a diagnostic test off with a nasal swab, maybe for 2 days waiting on a result, we're able to quickly, within the same day, screen people and quickly identify potential positives for additional diagnostic testing. And then finally, the PCR diagnostic testing, which we've continued to utilize to ensure that we find positive cases, we get them isolated, and we prevent further spread on campus. This last week, we launched a new dashboard, which many of you on campus have already seen. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to take a moment and go look at that. What you'll see is that there's a variety of additional elements that we've added to that dashboard in the spirit of both transparency and really assisting the community and the campus in understanding what the COVID burden on campus is and a variety of additional metrics, so you can see holistically, as we are behind the scenes, how the campus is doing. I'm happy to report at this stage, we've had relatively low COVID burden on campus. You can see amongst random testing, we've had very few positives, which is maybe the most important metric, and our contact tracers, who have just been absolute heroes. I mean, these are volunteers who've been trained with county public health to make phone calls immediately upon a positive, and we'll talk more about that with some of our guests today. Today, we're really going to focus in on this idea. We have a couple of students with us today who've actually had the experience of being infected with COVID-19, going through an isolation period, and coming back out and transitioning back into campus. And so we're really grateful to have that. We also have Dr. Jake Jones, professor of psychology, and he's going to chat with us a little bit today about how we as a campus and a campus community can continue to support one another through what can be some anxious and difficult times. So with that, I'd like to introduce a couple of our star students, Nellie and Allie. So we got acquainted a few years ago, right? I had just the luck of getting to be your freshman year initiative instructor, and so I'm really grateful that you ladies were willing to join us today. So thank you. As we're speaking today, feel free to remove your mask so that our viewers online can hear you and see your smiling faces. But let's maybe jump right into it. Nellie, Allie, you two were among the first students living on campus this fall to test positive. What was that like? I mean, how did this all kind of start?
Do you want to go? So I noticed that I had started to feel sick. It was like one of those things where you don't want it to be that, but you're also not willing to take the risk. So as soon as I had any, inclination that it might be COVID, I called my RA, and she reached out to a couple of the people that are on the Safe Together, Strong Together team, and they reached out to both Nellie and I and gave us the option of moving that night that we felt sick or the next morning. And obviously we live on campus and in a residence hall, so we decided to move that night to avoid any other contact, if that's what it was.
Now, were you two roommates at the time?
So we're suite mates.
Suite mates, okay.
Yeah, we both have a single, so we were able to quarantine together in a double, so that was nice, and not having to be by yourself during quarantine, because I don't think I would have made it 10 days without any kind of human contact.
Yeah, really tough. Did you start to also feel symptoms right about the same time Allie did?
Yeah, so we both were having symptoms, and it was kind of crazy. Sunday night, I went to her room, and I was like, I don't feel good. She was like, I don't feel good either. I was like, oh, crap. So that's when we kind of contacted everybody and figured it out. And moved.
And got moved over to an isolation room then for that. And how long were you in that isolation room?
10 days.
10 days, which is the university protocol,
yep.
Right? Probably felt like an eternity, though.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
How long, as you transitioned into that isolation phase, how many of those days did you really just feel crummy?
So I'd say the symptoms got a lot worse Monday for both of us. And then from Monday to probably, for me, it was Wednesday. I think for Nellie, it was Thursday.
Yeah.
It was we were super sick, sleeping the entire day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was the worst of it. I'd say it was having a little bit worse than a flu. And then after that, the symptoms slowly faded off and got better and better by day. But the first 3 days were definitely the worst.
You just felt not
terrible,
not
just
happy about
terrible.
life at that point,
yeah.
Right?
And we slept all day, so then we got behind on schoolwork, and then just life in general, we were just behind on everything. We'd literally wake up at 10, try and do homework. We didn't really succeed at that. Yeah. And then we were asleep by noon, wake up at 7, eat dinner, we're back to sleep.
And Nellie, is that for the first few days while you were still not feeling well?
Yep, that was still about Wednesday.
And then as you started to feel better, but you're still in isolation, Like, how did life change at that point? So you're still there, but maybe you don't feel quite so sick.
So boring.
Yeah. So
So boring.
Because it's like you can do all your homework, but then it's like, okay, what now? You know, we binge watched a lot of Netflix and Hulu and
I won't ask you which shows, but maybe you could make some recommendations later, right?
yes.
You probably got through a few. You
through a
you
lot.
chatted about homework. How was that process of connecting with instructors and your professors and trying to get caught up with homework? How did that work for you guys?
It was a little hard. Some professors like don't email back, which is kind of, you know, annoying. But majority of them email you back, and they're really like working with you and understanding and like appreciative that, you know, you said, hey, I don't feel good, and like didn't come to class. So that was nice that they were working with you.
Yeah. What about you, Allie? Did
It was
you
the
find-
same thing for me. I reached out to a lot of them. I'd say I heard back from like 90% of my professors. There were a few who didn't respond, but when they did, they were all really understanding, and returning to class was the same way. They all understood that, you know, I get behind and it's stressful coming back in, so.
Yeah. So, talk to me a little about the contact tracing. I think that's been a little bit of a mystery for some folks on campus, wondering how does that work. So, when you got your positive results, how quickly did you get a phone call after that?
So we got our positive results at like 2 a.m. So like that next morning we woke up with back-to-back phone calls.
Yeah,
like,
got it.
hey, you know, did you know you test positive? And we're like, oh yeah, we did know that.
Yeah.
And so they kind of just call and ask who you've been in contact with, where do you live, you know, when did you start feeling symptoms? Did you go to any major like community events or like any events when you started feeling sick? And you kind of just let them know like all of your information and give them, if you were in contact with people, like their phone numbers and their names, so they could get in contact with them.
Got it. So it's both a campus survey trying to figure out what interaction you've had on campus as well as off campus, right?
Yeah.
Because I know, like for you, Al, you work off campus,
Yeah.
right? And maybe you work on
I
campus.
work on
Is that
campus,
right?
yep.
So, Allie, how was that for you? I mean, you've got interaction in the community, et cetera.
Yeah. So luckily I hadn't been off campus
Yeah.
because they went from the day that I went into quarantine and backtracked a couple days to figure out my initial infection. So they were able to kind of knock out my off-campus job.
Yep.
But I did have to let them know where I worked, and so that if
Yep.
something came up, that they could trace it back to that. But I did notify them of my roommates and
Yep.
a couple people who I'd been in contact with around campus. And if they were worried about infection with them, then they reached out to them.
Yep. Got it. Okay, so while you were in there, you guys binged some Netflix, you worked on getting caught up. How did that feel in terms of just your overall well-being and mental health and things like that? What was that experience like?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Definitely makes you go a little crazy in
Just
the head.
feeling cooped up a little
Yeah.
bit?
It's hard
We-
because we go from rooms that we've designed and we've picked everything out and we
Colored
make it
and-
our home, and then
Yeah.
you move into a room and there's nothing.
Yeah.
So you have clothes and you have your sheets and that's it. And you're there for 10 days. So
We had our fish though too.
You brought a fish in there?
Yeah, we both-
we both have fish, so we brought our fish because we didn't want to leave them for 10
That
days.
wasn't a COVID risk, I guess.
It was really hard.
How did the
getting them.
food work? Did you guys get the food and any medications that you needed?
Yeah, we got food. So we got there Sunday night, which
Yeah.
was pretty late, like 8:39. So we had already eaten dinner that night.
Sure.
But the next morning they were dropping off food, and we got like Powerade and water and juice, bagels, bread. We got like a whole bunch of food dropped off, and that lasted us the entire
Yeah.
time.
they were
Okay.
also very good about asking if we needed any type of meds, NyQuil, DayQuil,
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
to make us feel better, which was really nice.
We got
Did-
hot meals.
Did you end up having to go see a doctor? Or did all of this happen via phone and consults and so forth?
We went for the initial test.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
And
Okay.
then at that point, you know, they were just asking like how we were feeling, and they told us if things got worse that we could go back and see a doctor, but it was never something that we were worried about. Like, yes, it wasn't great. The cold was pretty bad, but it wasn't.
You kind of knew at that point.
Yeah, wasn't life-threatening. for
Yeah.
us, so.
We were really lucky to not be crazy sick.
Yeah, and I guess, one of the interesting in and frankly, an anxiety-causing way for a lot of us is that some people have no symptoms, and some people have severe reactions, and it sounds like you guys were maybe somewhere in between, right? Like
Yep.
you had sounds like a rough go of the flu.
Yeah, for sure.
How's your interaction been once you got out of isolation? You're going back to work, you're going back to class, you're going back to your rooms. Like, what went well? What do you wish would have gone better?
It was really tough.
Yeah.
Coming back in, obviously, this whole pandemic is a scary situation and no one
Yeah.
wants to go through it. But it's also one of those things where it might be a little bit misunderstood. So coming back, whether it was friends or like living situation, not everyone was understanding on that we were safe to come back and that,
We were no longer contagious.
yeah, or that we were following the rules we were supposed to be following. It was a lot of people questioning us and kind of like keeping their distance, which is tough after you've just spent 10 days by yourself and
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
want
just
human
wanna,
interaction.
You just
Just
want to
wanna
hug
hang
and
out
to
with
hang out with
people.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, people were pretty mean. Like, both of us were getting people saying, like, don't hang out with me, don't come around me, which is like, you know.
Sounds like kind of projecting their fears on you a little
Right.
bit.
And it's like, you know, if we were still contagious or still thought that, you know, we could get other people sick, we would know we wouldn't be out of quarantine, you know? So that was like not cool. We didn't like that at all.
So as you sit here today, you guys were amongst the first to go through this experience, and we're now 7 weeks into the semester. We know other students are going to have to face this challenge. Fortunately, it hasn't been a lot, but still, what do you want other students and parents and faculty and staff, what do you want them to know about your experience that might help them be more supportive as a campus for folks who go through this experience?
I'd just say be understanding. Like, it's already a scary situation as it is, and again, we understand it's scary for everyone else.
Yeah.
But it's a tough thing to go through. And so just like be there for the people that you know are in quarantine or you know that are sick. Ask them if they need anything, or I mean, obviously you can't give it to them directly, but you might be able to help in some way, shape, or form, and just check up on them. And then once they're out of quarantine, you know, even if you're not comfortable being around them, just be respectful, because it's not something any of us want to go through. So.
Yeah. What do you think, Nellie?
Yeah, just like, I don't know, just wishing like when I got out, my friends were like, oh, I miss you. You know, can I come see you? Let's get coffee. Let's talk about quarantine, how it went for you. Just stuff like that, just because I think that if people would understand how it went for us and like how we felt, I think it would have ended better.
Yeah. Well, so as a campus, one of the challenges I guess we all have to face, you know, you've got this small percentage of students who have gotten infected, some of whom have felt nothing, and then some of you that's actually felt pretty crummy. But you've now gone through this, so you've walked in those steps. But for the rest, 9,900 and some odd rest of us, we haven't walked in your footsteps yet. And so I wonder if you have other advice, you know, for faculty, for staff, for other students that, you know, being respectful, maybe educating ourselves on some of those things, sounds like.
Yeah.
What other thoughts would you have or advice?
I would say take it seriously.
Yeah.
Wear your mask.
A lot of
COVID is
us-
real.
Yeah, a lot of us, you know, don't think we're going to get it. I didn't. I followed every single rule, and we got exposed from class. So it's one of those things where it's almost in a way unavoidable.
Yep.
So do everything you can to not get it, because it's not fun. So,
Yeah. That's
Wash
great.
and you never know how
Wash
you're
your
going to
hands.
react to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the truth, right? We don't know how people are going to react. So all those precautions in place of social distancing and wearing our masks and sticking with our Mavilies, right?
Yeah.
I think we still like, people are like, oh, well, now you have it. You don't have to wear your mask, right? You don't have to be cautious. And like, that's like not true. Like, you know, we're still wearing our masks. We're still washing our hands. We're still taking all the precautions that we took before getting COVID, and we will continue to do that.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. I had a conversation with one of our partners at Harvard earlier this week, and she's a medical doctor and was describing this very thing, which is we just don't know enough about this yet to be able to know what it means after
Right.
we've carried the virus, frankly. So
Yeah, there's a chance we could get it again. It could be
so
in a
your-
year. It could be in a week.
Yeah,
So.
so your precautions and thoughtfulness are the smart move, right?
Yes.
Definitely.
Ladies, I so appreciate you taking time to come and chat with us and chat with the audience today. I think, we're gonna chat with Dr. Jones in a few minutes about how we as a campus continue to do a better job both understanding this virus as well as how we do a better job supporting one another. And I think you've given us some tough but encouraging ways maybe we can all do a better job of encouraging and supporting each other through this.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Any
having
last
us.
thoughts for us?
I don't think so.
Okay. Let me check real quick and make sure we don't have any questions from our audience. And see here. Oh, we do have a question. What is the name of your fish?
Oh my goodness. We have two.
And you have two. Tell us about your fish.
So I have a fish. His name is Dumbo because he has like huge ears, and I also have a snail, and his name is Nemo because I can never find him. So
It's amazing.
My fish's name is Swim Shady.
Swim Shady.
Swim Shady.
Not
Yeah.
swim.
And then
see what you did
have a
there,
snail
Allie.
too, and his name's Bumble.
It's amazing.
Yeah, they're
So
our dorm friends.
Dumbo and Swim Shady both
Yep.
made the trek to
Yep.
your isolation
They
room.
make the trek home all the time too. They're used to it.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Traveling buddies.
Well, thank you for the time. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having us.
Really proud of you guys. I mean, just continuing to not just have the courage to, come bounce back, continue to be successful as I know you both are, but to be willing to come and chat with us about this and help us get better.
Thank
Yeah.
you
We
so
appreciate
much.
that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. So with that, we're gonna transition a little bit. We sure appreciate those students taking time, showing the courage to do that work and come and chat with us. The next person we'd like to welcome today is Dr. Jake Jones. Dr. Jones is, in addition to being a professor of psychology, is also the faculty advisor for the NAMI group on campus, which I'll let him tell you more about here. Dr. Jones, welcome to Facebook Live.
Well, it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, if you would, take a quick second and maybe give everybody a quick thumbnail sketch of your bio, how you found CMU, and kind of what your role is here.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a psychologist. I'm a professor in the psychology department here at CMU. I also run the internships for major, and so I get to be connected in the community also and connect our students to the Grand Junction community. I'm also a licensed psychologist here in the state of Colorado. So when we're not in school, I get to use that license and treat patients.
That's great.
And so,
So
I'm
you're a scholar, you're a professor, but you're also a practitioner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and the club that you mentioned, so NAMI on campus, so we're part of a larger worldwide organization. And so some of the things that we heard our students talk about here just a minute ago are things we have been doing in NAMI for many years in battles I would say we have been fighting. So that NAMI is a worldwide organization, and it is run by people who have mental illness, and the purpose of that organization is to battle the stigma that exists around mental illness. So the misinformation that might be out there around mental illness that keeps people from seeking treatment. As a club here on campus, we do events on campus to help break down those barriers and encourage students that if they have mental health concerns, that they can get help for those, and that help exists, and it's not a negative thing to ask for that help. It's actually a positive thing.
So being a college student has gotten increasingly difficult over the decades. Being a young person, period, isn't a cakewalk. But here we are in the midst of a pandemic and difficulties in the economy and a variety of, frankly, pressures going on. What's your sense? I mean, as students, it seems like are just facing more challenges maybe than they ever have.
Absolutely, I think so. I mean, college is the time in our society that we give, our young people to find themselves, right? They go off to college, they're away from their parents for an extended period of time. They're developing their identity, they're making lifelong friendships. A lot of them are meeting their long-term romantic partners, and they're figuring out what they want to do for their career too, and that's a lot, right?
Some big decisions, right?
Right, and now we throw in COVID and social distancing and a lot of barriers, so to say, to some of the natural things that occur in college. Mm-hmm. So what I've been seeing a lot with the students I've interacted with and in my classes is that, I think a lot of things happen naturally in college that really benefit us in a lot of ways. Like friends invite us to come to their house to hang out. We go to dinner with people. We do all of these social events, and they just kind of happen naturally out of that environment. And now that we've put these barriers have come in place because of COVID, I think it takes a lot more intentionality in order to have those things in our life. And it also brings some different aspects about those activities that are extremely important to us that maybe we didn't notice before. Hanging out with friends at their house is not only just fun, and we want to do that as college students, but it also gives us stress relief, right? And gives us a break from having to write papers and go to class. And in those social gatherings, we usually do a little bit of, college students are complaining a little bit about the work and those things, and that's healthy for us.
Some camaraderie.
Yeah, and I think with COVID, there has to be a much more intentional effort by the students to make those things happen, right? And so it's not, we can just all show up at Johnny's house after class, right? Because that's not following social distancing protocol. It's okay, let's find a way to hang out with Johnny and his roommates and me and my roommates that does meet these social distancing requirements, right? And
Dr. Jones, I wonder if, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as you're talking about this, it strikes me that, one of the foundational missions for us ever since last spring was figuring out how to get professors like you back in a classroom with students based on this idea that it is such a vital relationship. It is so important to be face-to-face. What has your experience been in terms of the classroom and engaging with your students and how that has maybe contrasting with an online experience or something like this?
Yeah, I think it, again, takes more of that effort, right? And especially in the online classes and the modified classes that we have, where some students are showing up one day and other students another day. And, some of the things that I've seen myself and other professors do is, the use of video, right? A lot of videos. I try to give feedback to students through videos in my fully online classes instead of just, typing in feedback. It's, hey, let me record a 30, 40-second video here that I can send to the student. And students have told me they really like those videos. It was nice to see me. It was nice to hear me. And then even getting inventive with some of our discussions and different assignments online. Instead of the students typing a response into for a certain assignment, make a video. I'd love to see you, and I think your classmates would love to see you too, and make a video of your response, and then we can also see your classmates and we can engage in that. And I've also tried to do group assignments too, because I think that's something that maybe we thought we couldn't do in this online environment, right? Like no more group assignments, but we have Microsoft Teams, we have Zoom. Students are able to meet online. They can still work on these projects together. There's many electronic tools where we can still connect the students together without having them to be face-to-face.
So, Dr. Jones, as you've spent time with students in the classroom, face-to-face, masked albeit, what's your sense in terms of how that face-to-face classroom experience has been going this fall?
Well, I think there's definitely some anxiety, right? And I think that exists for probably all of us here when we go to any public place. I think we're all a little nervous, but with the guidelines that we have set in place. I think by this point in the semester, most of us have got those down.
You feel like there's some comfort level,
and
probably
there is.
that wasn't there the first week, maybe?
Right, and I think holding on to some of those guidelines and knowing that if we follow these guidelines and listening to the experts can give us more of a sense of control over that, right?
You mentioned the experts. That, as I listened to Allie and Nellie, I think one of the things I've reflected on is we're all consuming information from all these various sources, right? We open the newspaper, we turn on a television, we have our news feeds on the various social media, et cetera. But there's a lot of disparate information out there about COVID-19. And I have to think, as a non-practicing psychologist, that's got to cause some anxiety for us, right?
Absolutely. We're in the information age, right? We have these wonderful little things called phones that hang out in our pockets and can give us the answer to just about any question we want.
Yeah.
Now, I think where we run into troubles with that is that the answer we get from those magical little devices are not always accurate or not always the answer that is going to be the most effective, right? And so I think especially in this day and age and in our society with social media and all these different platforms is that we do hear a lot of mixed messages, and we've heard a lot of mixed messages about COVID-19. And it's a new thing, right? It's something that scientists are still studying and they're still figuring out, and we're learning new things about it on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis. And so I think it's important to, especially for students, and I can tell you there's no student at this university who probably hasn't heard one of their professors say, use original sources or use core sources or whatever your department calls those, which is the idea that go straight to the experts, right? Is if you're going to get knowledge about something as important as COVID-19, let's not get it from a secondhand source. Let's not get it from a talk show host who's interpreting some research they read from, Mesa County Health Department or the CDC. Let's go straight to the CDC. Let's go straight to the Mesa County Health Department. Let's go straight to the experts here at CMU. And those are the people we can trust, right? Those are the people who are the experts or public health officials or medical doctors and people in our medical field are the experts. And those are the people we should be listening to, right? And the other people are social media personalities and all these other people we have. One of the reasons we like those people in our society is because they give their opinions, and sometimes we like to hear that. But this is not a topic where we really want opinions, right? We're looking for the facts.
Yeah.
And that's going to help us cope, right? Because if we have accurate facts, then we can adjust our behavior and we can control the aspects of this virus and the aspects of our own behavior that are going to keep us safe.
Well, it dawns on me that we've all wrestled through periods of gray, right, where we've kind of navigated sections of this pandemic over the last 6 months where we didn't feel like we knew or we didn't have great information. But it seems like today we know a heck of a lot more than we did 6 months ago, right? And so how is it that we continue to equip ourselves to respond in a way that, as Allie and Nellie shared with us, how we can support them and by getting those facts and things like that, how do we best equip ourselves to support each other here?
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to is first we have to manage our own stress levels, right? And we have to make sure that we're handling this on a personal level in a way that relieves our stress and puts us in a position where we can be a part of this bigger community and contribute to the overall good of the university. And I think that starts with what we're talking about is getting accurate information. Because there's two ways to cope with stress that we talk about in our field. And one of those ways is problem-focused coping, and another way is emotion-focused coping. And so problem-focused coping is what we prefer as a species, and that's when we can actually do something about the problem. We can have a specific behavior that will help solve the problem. And so if I break my hand, I know I can go to the doctor, they can reset it, they can put it in a cast, and then I can follow the rehab instructions and it will get better. And so with COVID, we look at it and we know that there are things we can do behaviorally to handle this pandemic, things like wearing a mask, following social distancing guidelines, washing our hands, keeping our hands away from our mouth and our nose. And those are the behavioral things that we can do. And I truly believe if we do those things and follow those guidelines, that's going to lower our stress level if we're getting that accurate information. And then the emotion-focused coping is the other side, and I think our students touched on that here, is there are some things in life that we can't fix with a behavior, right? We don't have the ability to stop this pandemic right now. Well, I hope we do. I hope we get that vaccine eventually, but right now we don't have that. So we have to deal with the emotions surrounding this event. And I think a good example of emotion-focused coping too is grief, right? And so when somebody passes away that is a friend or a family member close to us, that is a classic example of emotion-focused coping. We can't do anything about that, unfortunately. We can't bring them back. We can't go back in time and have that conversation with them that we wanted to have. We just have to deal with the grief that comes as an event for that. And so once we do all those behaviorally focused social distancing interventions and ways to cope with this, then I think we have to really look at our anxiety and our fears that exist with this and say, how do I deal with these fears and how do I appropriately express these, right? And, treating people coming out of quarantine as like we heard our students say, treating our other fellow students like that is not a good way.
I wondered how you reacted. I mean, you were offset listening to our students describe that experience. What was running through your head as you were listening to some of the difficulties they faced upon re-entry, as it were?
Well, my first thought was that was the opposite reaction people should have been having, right?
Yeah.
Because when we have people come out of quarantine or isolation, they're the one people we know for sure that don't have COVID, right? And so instead of avoiding them, maybe those are the people you would want to hang out with even more.
Yeah.
Secondly, I thought of the stigma, right? And the stigma is when we misinterpret information and associate some negative characteristics with a group of people. And in this case, it's people who have had COVID or come into contact or been in isolation. And so for me, I thought of that was driven out of fear, right? And when we're fearful as human beings, we want to somehow control that fear. And usually that's through the behavioral coping that we talked about, the problem-focused coping. And so I think sometimes that fear is overwhelming some of us, and we're saying, I walk around all day on campus with my mask on thinking who has COVID and who doesn't. And now here's somebody who I know had COVID or at least came into contact with it. And unfortunately, some people with that misinformation is saying, well, I'm going to avoid this person and that's going to make me safer. And that's just not correct.
As we're having this conversation today, specifically for this reason, we've now had a variety of students who have worked through this process. It seems like each week we get better at it based on the feedback we're getting from students, based on the feedback that the entire campus, I think, is going through this experience for the first time together, frankly. I think one of the things that these students helped us appreciate was the difficulty of being isolated. And I think as of a couple of weeks ago, some of the student clubs on campus have stepped up to start delivering care packages and trying to provide exactly the kind of support to those students who are isolated. But yet, for instructors and for professors and for administrators and staff and others, what are some of the small things we can all be doing to help engage and support these students moving ahead?
Yeah, I think reaching out to them. I liked what they said, that being together they felt like really helped them. And as a species, we need human connection. We're social people. Now, some of us need more of that than others, but we all need some type of social connection on some level. Yeah. And when I listen to the girls and their talk, I took away that having each other during that, and I think you could see how close they were.
Yeah.
My guess is their relationship is a lot closer than it was before they went in.
They've shared that as much with me.
Yeah.
Really became a lot closer as a result of this.
Yeah, and so you know, for students, I've had a couple of students who've had to go into quarantine, and as a professor, I've made sure I've said, hey, you know, can we just chat on Zoom real quick? Because I want to see you. And, you know, and I ask them how they're doing and take interest in them outside of just the class, right? And say, look, you know, I'm your professor, but I also care about you as a person. And then, you know, give them, this is what you can do to be successful in class. This is what you can do to catch up. Because as they said, that was about all they had to do, right? That and binging on Netflix. And I even had one student who finished all of his work and was quarantined and had emailed me and saying he was bored and was talking about some Netflix shows. And I said, well, you know, there is an extra credit assignment that is open in D2L that you could, you know, get ahead and complete. You know, you could read ahead in your book. And I think even reaching out, other students reaching out to those students, right? Of saying, hey, you know, let's watch. I noticed today that we're seeing society start to adjust to this too. I saw today that Disney Plus added a feature where you can invite a friend to watch a live streamed show. And so those are the types of things I think that students can do for each other, is they could say, hey, I know you're in quarantine, but hey, let's get online and let's watch this show together. I can watch it from my dorm room and you can watch it and we can talk about it and we can connect that way.
Dr. Jones, as you think about if I'm a student or a parent, I'm watching this now, obviously this is your field, you're actively thinking about these things, but not every maybe professor is. What are some of those proactive things students can be doing to engage with professors while they were maybe in a quarantine or isolation situation?
Yeah, I think being active, whenever you're emailing a professor in that situation, I think sometimes professors don't know what to say back, right? Mm-hmm. Sending an email saying, I'm quarantined, I've got COVID, and then it's just, you know, sometimes the professor will receive that email and say, oh, okay, I guess, you know, I'll see you when you get back, right? Like, so the student being active and asking for what they need from the professor, I think is important. Of
Good
saying,
self-advocacy.
Yeah, advocate for yourself and say, this is what I need from you. And you're doing that in a nice way and saying, I know, you know, everybody is under stress here, including faculty and staff. And so advocating in a nice way and saying, this is what I would like to have from you if you could provide that to me so that I can keep up with class. I also think engaging other students in your classes too, because never underestimate, you know, your fellow students and their ability to help you in that class too. If they're still attending that class, then there's nothing, I don't think any professor is going to argue with, you know, a student taking notes and then emailing those from the class to their fellow classmate. Those are things that can keep them active.
So we've chatted a lot about, you know, students, you know, especially a freshman or something, 18, 19-year-old kid coming to college for the first time, being away from home for the first time, all these things. So they're facing their own unique stresses. But it dawns on me that the highest risk population on this campus are faculty oftentimes. I wonder if you might just take a quick minute and reflect on how has it been for you as a professor, has it been for your colleagues as professors, doing this work that you love, being engaged with students while recognizing that that very well could mean something it didn't used to mean in the past, right?
Absolutely, and I think there's been a lot of hard decisions we've had to make as faculty members here, because I think most of our faculty members here are here because they're invested in our students. They want to see our students succeed, and not only is it hard for us to watch our students go through this and struggle through this, and we want to be there to help them,
Sure.
And we want to be there to support them, we've also got a lot of adjustments that we've had to make, right? Many of us have had to teach online for the first time and learn new techniques and new skills to be able to do that and be able to deliver the material to the students. Mm-hmm. And so I think that balance of you know, supporting the students and providing a quality education experience with them while also managing our own mental health, because we know we are at higher risk than most of the students, has been a difficult balance, right? And I think we have been able to, as overall as a faculty, I think we've responded very well here from what I've heard from students, and we've been able to be pretty effective with that. But it does feel like we're being pulled in two directions at a time.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've tried to prioritize it. And just last week when I had a student go into quarantine, I was looking at, I have an hour left in the workday before I have to deal with my own family matters, and I thought, should I grade these 5 papers, or should I answer this email from this student in quarantine and give them some work to do? And for me, that the student in quarantine was a much higher priority than grading those final 5 papers.
Sure.
Because that student in quarantine needs something to do, and I think needed more support from me than grading those final 5 papers.
Dr. Jones, I wonder if we might take a minute. I know we're well into our program today and answer some questions, some of which may be for you and some may be for me. So let me look and see. Lisa, thanks for your comment. We appreciate the feedback. We are trying to do these updates on a regular basis, and we'll continue to try and be good about doing that, and appreciate that feedback. Looks like Danica's asked a question about visiting dorms and going into other dorms. And Danica, this is actually a fairly simple one. We have, since the beginning of the semester, prohibited people from going across residence halls and visiting in other halls. I hate doing that. I really do. I think it's one of the most challenging protocols we've had to put in place, but I will tell you, based on how these first 7 weeks have gone, it is working. So that policy is still in effect. It's one I really look forward to loosening at some point, but at this time, students are not allowed to bring visitors into those other residence halls. And I'll just make a quick note. One of the reasons we've been so effective in finding cases that we're totally unaware that were infected is through wastewater. And of course, that is because of the integrity of simply maintaining those folks who are in a residence hall and not having visitors and cross-contamination there. So I don't like it, but that is the current policy, and it's been quite effective. We got a question about travel. I know my guess is that your family's been in the same boat mine has, where we're feeling a little cabin feverish, but the answer to some of you who've been asking questions about this is we have asked the entire campus, faculty, staff, administrators, and students not to travel this semester from August the 17th on through November the 20th. I think it's a Friday, where students will go home for Thanksgiving, and then we'll finish the last week and final exams remotely. We're asking people not to travel. If travel happens outside of that, we have addressed that on one-on-one basis with students. It might mean that students have to come in and take another test. It may mean that students have to pay for that additional test because they are putting the campus at further risk. If you have a question about this, please feel free to reach out to the email safety@coloradomesa.edu. We're happy to answer those questions, but recognize that travel has been a challenge. I think it's a challenge for all of us. We're all sitting tight and really trying to make sure that we do our best while not further endangering or putting the campus at risk.
And so an interesting thing I could add to that is that we've seen a new term pop up since COVID, and it's called micro-travel. Have you heard of that?
Sure.
So micro-travel is the idea, and I think here in Grand Junction we can really do that, is instead of taking these long trips as we travel here in the local area. And I think here in Grand Junction, with all the wonderful hikes and outdoor activities and mountain biking we have, a micro-travel event would be go out to 18 Road in Fruita and take a hike. Maybe that's an area of the outdoors you haven't explored yet here.
Yeah.
And I know that my family and I have been doing a lot of micro-traveling here lately to keep us entertained. We went up on the monument and did a trail that we weren't familiar with or had never done before. And we got some of those same benefits you get from traveling to new places from that little micro-travel.
Well, and I should say that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Mesa County Public Health expanded the local region in which we are permitted to travel. So it's a pretty good-sized region. It includes Mesa, Delta, Montrose, Garfield. Also includes, though, Pitkin and Gunnison and Ouray counties, which really gives you that opportunity to get into some of the most gorgeous country in Colorado. So getting outside is really a great answer to some of that cabin fever that we all know is happening. Looks like Lauren is commenting that Dr. Jones is the best professor she has ever had. So
Glad I showed up today.
good job. You can add that one to your portfolio, Lauren. Thanks for that feedback.
Thanks.
I think before we wrap up, probably important to reflect on the fact that not every campus has made it thus far. There's been, frankly, a long line of campuses who couldn't figure out how to pull this off, and that's not us patting ourselves on the back. I think that's a culture thing, and frankly, it's credit to our students, to our faculty, to the whole community really buying into a common mission. And we've had a great community in Mesa County Public Health and other partners that have helped us get to this point. So we're grateful that we've been able to make it this far together as a campus, 7 weeks strong, and the data continues to look good and promising, even though we know that we are not out of the woods yet. So I want to continue to encourage, as Nellie and Allie said, they've now had to walk that unpleasant road, and I'll just channel their admonition: wash your hands, wear your mask, follow the safety protocols, the social distancing, stick with your Mavleys, and we'll get through this together. We appreciate very much you joining us today. Dr. Jones, really appreciate you and all your work with our students and taking a minute to come and chat with us today about ways that all of us as a campus community can continue to support our students, our faculty, our staff, who unfortunately may have to walk this road. But we know that we do this stronger when we do it together. So with that, we'll sign off. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.